Om is something else. And the sound of Om is inherent in all sound, and it can be heard by anybody who attunes to it, and you can hear it within your own mind, and it's the sound of the universe. Is there at all times. Is there at all times. Amen. We know that the practice of Dr. Diamond, where you go, ha 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 ha. You're all familiar with that, right? To get you out of a negative feeling or a negative space, you know, you pound the thymus gland and you go ha ha ha, and you think of someone you love, and that instantly raises your energy and your vibration. And if you were in an energy field, that puts you in a positive one. And it has an effect on the immune system, and of course on the acupuncture system and on the kinesiologic response. So now we've tried to create a context of rationality, unnecessarily, but because the ego is a doubting Thomas, in fact the ego is built on nothing but doubt, because of its doubt, we tried to build a logical premise upon which one can approach spiritual reality and at the same time be logical, scientific, modern, advanced, and educated. Anybody argues about it, you say, you don't know much about quantum mechanics, do you? The mere belief that prayer is effective is sufficient to make prayer effective, is it not? Even if prayer wasn't effective, the fact we all believe it's effective, it now is effective, I'll tell you. So that quantum potentiality then has no limitation, and therefore the degree of one's faith then empowers it. This group here is enormously powerful. What it holds in mind rings out throughout all of human consciousness. It takes only a few people, very advanced, only a few consciousnesses, very advanced, to negate all of Ethiopia and Biafra and God knows what else goes on. Because the power of that is so enormous that it counterbalances all of that. So we all serve all of life through all of our spiritual endeavors. Everything that we surrender to God, for the good of all, every advance, every forgiveness that we personally do, every time we let go of feeling sad and unhappy, every negativity we let go benefits all of mankind. Consequently, anybody who's in spiritual endeavor is of service to man at all times, just by their intention. So meditation then is really changing the context of one's life, that one's life becomes a meditation, in that it's lived in form, but in the context of the awareness that the divinity is the unmanifest out of which the manifest is arising, and you're merely witnessing creation unfolding in the world of form as it appears to perception. Well, we had some questions this morning. Shall we do a few questions? Anybody got any questions they'd like to bring up? If not, we'll read these. There was something we were going to explain today, and I forgot what it was. So people ask, how can they advance their consciousness? In a way, I wish I'd never calibrated the levels of consciousness, because people miss the point of it. The point of it is merely to show where one is on a pathway. Consciousness is evolving. Where is it at a certain point? Well, of course, it is amazingly instructive to calibrate a great many things. And a book we're working on now, we're going to do 1,000 calibrations. We've got 998 done, I guess. We'll do 2 before lunch, and there we got it. It gives you a comprehension of the evolution of consciousness from the beginning of time, as it first manifests on this planet, in the forms of creation, as it evolves up through the expressions of life, how it evolves through the primate and into takes expression in the form of the human brain, Homo erectus, now Homo sapien, and in the book we announce the birth of a new genus of man, Homo spiritus. The nature of man has actually shifted. In the late 1980s, when the consciousness level of mankind went from 190, which is non-integritous and non-truth, and it jumped to 207, that was the beginning of a new paradigm of what it means to be human. One could be as a Saracen, as a Hun, one could be called human, calibrating at 110, slaughtering everybody. The only thing that primitive man thought about was slaughtering others, and then looting and raping, and then slaughtering some more. And if they had nobody to slaughter, they got bored and they sailed around looking for somebody to slaughter. That's all they did. Europe, era after era, wasn't it? Century after century. It was this horde from here, this horde from here. I mean, these people had nothing to do. What'd they do? Just sit around, hey, let's go raid somebody? So we call that human. Well, it's really sort of pre-human, isn't it? It's human in an anatomical kind of definition. It's not human in what we mean by human. Human, by what we mean as human, to be human means to be aware of the impact of what you're doing on others. It's the beginning of spiritual awareness. We can't really call Bin Laden human. He's humanoid, sort of. Humanoid. Looks human, talks human. But without that inner essence that we identify with humanness. I mean, it's not really human yet. Calibrates at 90. That's not really human yet. Huh? That's the savage horde, the barbarian. Huh? Then in the late 80s, suddenly we see the conscious level of man jump to 207, in which spiritual awareness, spiritual integrity, spiritual awareness as an innate human quality comes into full recognition. You see, in the evolutionary tree of the primate, Neanderthal man doesn't evolve to Homo erectus and Homo sapien. What happens is on the hominid tree, this branch goes off and becomes that, and this branch breaks off. It's a new branch. It's not the evolution. Neanderthal doesn't become President Bush. Huh? Neanderthal goes this far. And then Neanderthal, then Cro-Magnon comes out, see? And then, you know the names of all, they're always finding some fossil somewhere. Creep-down man or something. No, Piltdown man or Cro-Magnon man. So the thing evolutionary-wise that's interesting is that they are different branches of the tree. It is not the original branch, see? The mouse does not become the lion, no. The mouse goes off this way, and then the rat comes off this way, and then the marsupial goes off this way. So I think what's happened now is that the evolution of human consciousness is such that the human nervous system can now handle the energy required for spiritual awareness. I don't think lower entities, I don't think their nervous system is able to handle it. We never asked these things before. Let's ask those just for fun. The nervous system of Neanderthal man is equipped to handle spiritual awareness, resist. He can't handle it. So what's happening now is actually through evolution, the nervous system is able to handle spiritual energy resist. In this lifetime, it's been extremely, agonizingly painful, resist. has been extremely agonizingly painful. Because each sudden, sometimes extremely major advance in consciousness was also accompanied by a severe burning, painful sensation throughout the human body. That's what went on the other day, Resist. Yeah, it just never stops. So it's like the nervous system is evolving to handle. The spiritual energy is quite demanding. Jesus Christ sweat blood, you know. The Buddha was tormented by agonies of like his bones were all broken, beset by negative entities and energies there. But he said his bones were all broken. And we read that in Korea, and instantly it was okay that pain and agony would come and go. Okay for the Buddha, it's okay for me. So what's happening then is that the nervous system is evolving to be able to handle higher spiritual energies. If they're not that well evolved yet, they're painful. They're painful. Neanderthal man would have been horrible. He would have been miserable. I wanted to personalize it because the witness of personal experiences. Let's see how we can ask this. All right, so for mankind to evolve more spiritually, his nervous system actually has to evolve to be able to handle resistance. His actual nervous system, Let's see, is it the neurons? It's the neurons themselves that have to evolve resistance. It's still not clear to me what causes the actual pain of it. But anyway, all right. So then what's going on is that through evolution then, evolution is the way creation appears on the planet. The nervous system of mankind is evolving so as to be able to handle the enormous power of a higher spiritual energy. If you're not ready for it, it's really quite painful. It really is quite agonizing. And when you clear up some spiritual dilemma, at least in my experience, some major spiritual dilemma, there would be a whole period of like feeling like all your nerves are on fire. I mean, it's just horrible, really. But the realization of what's the cause of it makes it bearable. So it means to me that evolution now is that mankind's consciousness level is rising. His nervous system has to rise in order to be able to handle it. He has to evolve in order to be able to handle a higher spiritual energy. We share our spiritual strength and hope with each other because through that mutuality we create a field, and the field itself tends to support the advancement of consciousness. The teacher, the energy field of the teacher is one of context. One of context. Out of the context arises content, which the audience finds interesting. But it's really the context that gives the content its meaningfulness, its comprehensibleness, its impact. It helps people accept things that they find unacceptable. There's always questions about the technique of kinesiology, and I can't really go into it. We've done it many, many times. We'll go through it one more time. We'll do it one more time. The basics of what you need to know, Susie and I. Come on over here in the light, Susie. You see, the two people have to be integrous. You've got to calibrate over 200. It means your intention has to be that you're interested in truth for the sake of truth. You know what I'm saying? It's like an innate curiosity about what is the truth of this. You know, what is the truth of something? So you have an innate curiosity about what is the truth of the thing. Not for some reward, not for sensation, not because you can win in the stock market. You know, you have to really, really want to know what is the truth of this matter. So the two people are integrous. They don't have any background noise, they don't have any music, they don't have any distractions. Their intention is to come together to discern the truth. we've found to experience which one of us serves as the best. I'm good for the questioning, she's good at answering. So you find a person you can work with. Now the question itself, the intention of the question has to be integrous. So two integrous people come together. They want to know, for the sake of truth and the pursuit of truth, well, you know, what are the facts about the case? And they then simply ask with two fingers, and they press down, and I say, resist. That's all she does, to resist. You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do kinesiology. Some people make it so difficult. They write me a long letter and say, what? This audience here calibrates over 400, resist. Okay? Got it? That's all there is to the test. That's all there is to it. Just yes or no. All right, now there's a comparative difference of the strength. I don't bear down as hard as I can to see if I can break her arm down. I'm just going to push down like with a couple of feathers, you know? A couple of feathers. Okay. What I'm holding in mind is true, is it? Okay, okay. See, I can do it with one finger. So she resists to the degree that it takes to resist one finger. All right, now if I ask another question and the same amount of resistance doesn't hold her, then she goes down. So when she resists with the same amount of strength, let's say. How much strength does it take to resist one finger? All right, next time I ask a question, she's going to resist to that extent. Because we want to compare the two. You understand? We're trying to compare two states of strength. So if this time she resists lightly, and the next time she resists mightily, she's going to throw off the answer. So the person, if you use common sense, what you're trying to do is just, you're trying to get a comparison between the two states. Yeah, all right? That's all we have to do. And so it's very, very simple. It's yes or no. So when I used to do it in front of large audiences, we had 1,000 people. We'd divide up into 500 group pairs of doctor and patient. And I would hold up an apple and I'd say, okay, everybody in the audience, doctors get ready. And I'll test the patient, okay. Now look at this apple up here. Okay, now resist. And then I'd say, all right, now look at this apple. Then they would resist. Okay. They would look at this apple, but on that apple they would all go weak. This is 1,000 people I've never met. I don't know from any of them. 500 couples of doctor and patient. When they looked at this apple, they all went weak. When they looked at this apple, they all went strong. One had pesticide in it, the other didn't. That's all there was. We repeated the same thing in Korea. Dr. Moon handed us 2 bags with green leaves in it. We didn't know what it was even about. She said, test these out. One made everybody go weak, one made everybody go strong. And then she opened up later and said, well, one had a pesticide in it. All right. So that's all there is to the kinesiologic test. It's not really difficult. If people get different answers, there's a number of reasons. One is the shift of intention. You can have background music. You can have things throwing you off. We sometimes find that husbands and wives don't work well together. I don't know why, but not infrequently. We'll get a married couple say, well, you know, for some reason we can't seem to work with each other. I suppose if we spend enough time with kinesiologic research, we could find why that is so in that specific pair. We did find the reason, something about chi energy. Oh yes. Then we found that some people really couldn't do kinesiology. It had to do with somehow with the balance of the chi energy in their acupuncture system, the energy system. Wasn't that right? Yeah. We never did really find out why a lot of people can't do it other than non-integrity. Some people are not really capable of it because of the balance, the chi balance in their energy field resist. Yeah, we got a yes to that. Of the people in this room, for instance, what percent would have that problem? We have permission to ask that resist. More than 5% might have that problem. More than 4% might have that problem. That's because of the people in this room. Oh yeah. In the public, in the public, more than 5%, 10%, 15%. Yeah. So in the public, just in the public at large, there's probably 10% of the people. Just there's something about the imbalance of their chi energy. They're not suitable. In a more spiritually committed group like this, the energies are more. All right, so I just wanted to answer that question about kinesiology, because you can't go into the details. And you have to find somebody that you can work with. We were talking about how to forgive yourself out in the courtyard before, and we were joking around. If you're rotten and no good, so you're rotten and no good. So, what's to forgive yourself for? That you're wicked and bad? Of course you're wicked and bad. We're all wicked and bad, man. We wouldn't be here, right? You're rotten, no good, and it was a terrible and awful thing to do. You're right. That's a fact. You see? So we unplug the guilt, because guilt is, like we were saying before, guilt is its own payoff. If it's okay to feel guilty and okay to be wrong and okay, then there's no payoff, and that disappears it. How long can you hang on guilt if it's okay to be rotten and no good? Everybody here is rotten and no good, right? What would a lifetime be if you weren't rotten and no good? You wouldn't have to be here. I mean, a whole lifetime is spent overcoming being rotten and no good. Worthless, wrong, stupid. And if not, our endeavor is to prove that the other guy is. If we're not, then he is. So that's the game, huh? Well, they asked me some teachers here, I don't know. We're going to do a lot of teachers in the book. Some of these teachers, I don't know. People find obscure writers elsewhere that I've never heard of. I don't know. All the truth that's ever been needed has already been written. You know, you don't have to look through the back stacks in the bookstore to find Hocus Pocus that lived in 1412 and what he said. I mean, it's interesting what he said, and it may or may not be true. And I can understand that one would want to know. But we can ask this one. I don't know who he is. But it probably wouldn't be valid. No, I don't think it'd be valid because I don't know whose side this is. I want to finish these questions before noon. Each question, we only have a few minutes. Each question brings up a whole different principle and a whole different area for discussion. You know, any one of these questions we could spend the entire morning tracing it through to its ultimate meaning. Is discovering the unmanifest a function of exact focusing or peripheral focus? It says, please don't say both. Well, I was going to say both. Oh, well. No. Seeing the unmanifest, seeing that which is non-form and form is far more advanced. You start out by realizing that which you are is the context out of which all of life and all of its expressions, both subjective and supposedly objective, is arising. That you are the field out of which that is all arising. It starts out as the visual field, that all that's happening within this room is happening within an infinite space of silence and non-form, out of which arises sound and all those things. Is there such a thing as individual identity? There is, as far as imagination goes, as far as the ego goes, that which is karmically inheritable from one thing to the next is the degree to which one holds one's identity of self with the ego. It's an illusion. It's transitory. It lasts, of course, for hundreds of millions or thousands of years. So it'll do till it wears out. But the thought that I am this or I am that within form then creates a karmic consequence. Creates a karmic consequence. The thought that I'm an individual separate from God, that I am that which is born and dies, that I am that which calls itself me, this physicality and its history, yes, that'll have karmic consequences. That's what the Buddha meant when the Buddha said, if you don't want to keep reincarnating, then you've got to become enlightened and transcend and realize that you are that out of which that formulation arises. You are not the formulation, you're that out of which the formulation arises. You're not the thought, you're that out of which the thought arises. You're not the emotion, you're the source out of which that emotion arises. To realize that you are a priori to mind. So in meditation then, one witnesses the procession, and by one-pointedness of mind, one all of a sudden in one instant gets that I am that out of which thought arises. You realize that mind, in speaking generically, is that which is present just prior to thought. The field here. You don't know thought until you hear it from me. What was there right prior to my saying that? You understand? There is a readiness, a presence, the capacity for awareness, the capacity of hearing this, the capacity for comprehension this is already here. It's already in existence before I just said that. Got it? Right before I said it, you're what you are before I say anything. How do I know what it's going to do? It just jumps across the stage and does anything it wants to. It does anything it wants to. Thank goodness it obeys the law or it would get arrested. Thank goodness it's been trained to at least have a radar unit in the car. Ah, yes. That radar unit tells you what's coming up ahead of time. Huh? A little anticipatory preparation. And that's what the mind is doing, you see? Like a little radar unit. It isn't there on your screen yet, so you're the screen that has the capacity to register the thought, as it's said. It's very simple to realize that you're the unmanifest out of which the manifest arises, right? Everybody here knows that already, correct? Isn't that so? Yeah. Oh, thank you, God, jeez. The Buddha told me that, and I said, I'll be sure and tell him when I go back, you know? He said, we didn't have the printing press in those days, Dave. When you go back, I want you to bring this up. I said, Buddha, don't feel guilty about it. Never mind. I will see to it that it gets said. Let's see if the Buddha wants me to say that.
Oh, the pressure's on.
We have permission to ask. This is the intention of the Buddha resist. All right, thank you. The transition of the Buddha then is out of the unmanifest, the potentiality to realize that you are the source of the manifest, out of which comes existence, out of which comes beingness, I amness. The book I'm finishing now is called I. Not I amness. Amness is already late in the game. Don't you understand? I is prior to amness, prior to existence. That which I was prior to this little body suddenly appearing in this wagon. Trauma day. The infinite potentiality for that consciousness to arise and then presume existence, because it identified with the physicality, then went into shock about existence versus non-existence. The unmanifest is prior to beingness, prior to existence, prior to isness, prior to amness, prior to amness, prior to isness, prior to existence, prior to consciousness itself. Nisargadatta said that, didn't he? Yeah. He was right. First time I read that, I thought, what the hell does that mean? It's just that it's so obvious that, as you can see, it's extremely obvious. There you go. Just know that you are the field out of which arises the content of the field. Because how do you know there's anything in the field? You can only know by knowing it. That which has the capacity of knowingness has the capacity for recognition, see? You see, we point this out here, recognition. You say, you see, it goes back then through this, that's what meditation is. So contemplation then is walking about in the world in a meditative state in which one's focus is on the source out of which the entire phenomena is arising. Outside of time, outside of conceptualization, outside of wording this, outside of giving it names. Huh? There's awareness of awareness, but there's no awareness of an I being aware. That's a meditation that you'll add on top of it. Okay, is there any more questions? Because I think we have to stop in exactly 2 minutes. If anybody has a question that's absolutely silent and wordless, I'm willing to hear it. Let's start from the, yes.
You want to calibrate the level of the audience before and after?
We decided we'd do it a little bit differently this time. We're going to do what the change is at the end. Let's do what the change is already. You'll see. There's a change already from prior to now. It's just more than 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, 8 points. Wow. More than 7 points, more than 8 points. Okay. Matter a couple hours, conscious level of the group, jumped 7 or 8 points, just like that. That's an enormous jump, you see. You don't think that's much, that's enormous, that's enormous. It takes a whole lifetime of all that you learn just to go up a couple of points. And all that we've said is seminal in that it starts a process going. When we were talking about the infinite quantum potentiality, to just hear certain things already starts a process going, you see. Nobody in this room is the same as they were when they walked in. Is that a fact? Nobody in this room better dare. Nobody in this room is the same as when they walked in. That's correct. Nobody in this room has escaped the field. Why? Because the field is what lifts us all. The field is what lifts this being entity here. See, it's the field. So one's surrender to God then is merely surrendering to buoyancy. Buoyancy. If you just don't interfere, you automatically begin to rise. So this afternoon, we're going to speak about renunciation. Renunciation is one of the traditional pathways to God. It's very often associated with the meditation as a formal discipline. One renounces the world, joins a monastery, lives a certain kind of a life. And a lot of spiritual seekers sort of feel guilty that they're not doing that. Anybody here feel guilty that they're not a monk somewhere in a... Yeah, right. Periodically you think, if I was really spiritually committed, I wouldn't be driving on the way to work here. I'd be, eating rice and beating on gongs and meditating and shaving my head and sitting still and not fooling around here in the world. So a lot of us go through that period of feeling guilty that we have not, reached the maximum extreme of renunciation. So this afternoon I want to talk about renunciation. What is the essence of renunciation? Because in a way, all spiritual work is renunciation. For one thing, you're renouncing the negative for the positive. So all spiritual work is, in essence, renunciation. Okay, we'll meet again. What time? 1 o'clock. Thank you. Let's ask about the calibration, the level of consciousness of mankind. We have permission to ask that. The consciousness level of mankind, all of it, world population is over 207, 208. It's at 207, 208. No, it's still 207. Consciousness level of mankind doesn't move for long centuries. I don't know why. It stood at 190 for many, many centuries. If you go back to the 1500s, 1400s, it stood at 190 many, many centuries. And then suddenly quickly jumped to 207. And now, because somebody asked, has it moved? It's still at 207 as of today, anyway. 207. What does that mean? It means whatever you want it to mean. Nothing in and of itself has any meaning, you understand that? All meaning is a projection, an interpretation, a superimposition. If you look at a sunset, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It is what it is, as the expression of the divinity of the expression of its essence. Nothing means anything, therefore nothing has a why to it. Why is a sunset? What do you mean, why is a sunset? You know, it just is, huh? The mind is not happy with that. It wants an explanation for things because it wants to propagate itself. If it can formulate a question, then it justifies another large research grant, for one thing. It doesn't, it just is that way, you know, it just is that way. Like that fuzzy little thing on the microphone, I mean, it just is what it is, you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure people have explanations for it, but whatever it was, I thought it was adorable. I sort of miss it now, actually. So, we wanted to sort of add to the discussion of meditation some commentary on attachment and renunciation. What the mind has trouble letting go of are its attachments. We talked about that this morning. One attachment is the emotional payoff. Another attachment to thoughts is the narcissistic investment. The thought that I created those thoughts, they're mine, they're precious. The overvaluation of thoughts because of the narcissism that is innate to the ego. As we mentioned before, how the ego arises, its origination in this domain, in this dimension, on this planet, you know, it arose as an evolutionary outgrowth of the animal nature. We said there's no point in feeling guilty about your ego and how it operates. It grew over the millennia. Millions of years of evolution. The animal has to know here from there. And it presumes the reality of a here and there, and for survival, therefore, the ego is based on a duality of this versus that. Good to eat, not good to eat. Friend, foe. Gets into dualities of opposites. And in the animal world, that's very useful. You better know what's to eat or what's going to eat you. You better know the difference. And if you're going to jump on a mouse, you better know that you are here and the mouse is there so that you can estimate the jump. So the whole ego then is based on the animal consciousness of survival. So it's basically dualistic by virtue of its structure. Because it's structured that way, there's no point of feeling guilty about it because you didn't create it that way. It thinks in terms of good, bad, right, wrong, etc. with the development of the forebrain, the intellect, now, the style of animal instinctual expression takes on far more elaborate form, far more elaborate elaborations now, so that what were limited to the physical reach of the animal can now be extended out globally and via the internet. What was once limited to the edge of the woods can now threaten the whole universe, the whole world, the human world. So we see that the intellect then extended the animal motivations and contextualizations about reality and have spread them out into much more sophisticated extensions. Intrinsically, however, they are still the same thing. The animal, in order to survive then, valued certain things, and there arose attachment. And attachment really begins, you might say, noticeably in the mammalian world. The infant's attachment to the mother is essential and critical to survival. Emotional attachment. We see the beginning then of that which is nurturing in the evolution of the animal world that wasn't there with the dinosaur. It shows up in the bird. The mother bird hangs around, waits for the little birdies and feeds them. And then we see the development really through the maternal bond of the development of love, which later develops into romantic love between male and female. But love really first emerges within the animal kingdom as maternal nurturance. So attachment then comes in very early. The infant is obviously quite attached. It gets attached to the mother. It's actually the mother's lovingness to which the infant owes its survival. The mother's lovingness is a non-linear reality. The mother's physicality is linear. The infant doesn't differentiate the two. It gets that love and survival is coming from this, and gets attached to that physicality and that form. It isn't this that's ensuring the infant's happiness and survival, but the lovingness, which is not physical. So its physical survival is really based on the non-linear. Its linear survival is really coming as a result of the non-linear, because love, which calibrates at 500 and unconditional love at 540, love and lovingness is what is the source of the infant's survival, which then takes expression through the mother's nurturance. Anyway, attachment then becomes a habit. Attachment is also, because we identify with what we consider to be our own narcissistic creations, our own thoughts and feelings and all, become overvalued. Traditionally, one could renounce the world and join a spiritual organization that is time-honored. It is recognized throughout society. To join the monastery, to join a nunnery, to renounce the world is a traditional pathway to God, in which one acts out, in the external world and makes an absolute statement and leaves the world. So, traditionally, at one time, most serious spiritual seekers, or many, were actually renunciates. One could become a hermit, one could become solitary, one could join a small group, or one could join a large organization and become a formal renunciate. The usual renunciation was of the materiality of the world, acquisition, ownership, and therefore the historical attributes of the renunciate was poverty, patience, sexual abstinence, and devoting one's life to service for others. In the meditative tradition, then, it allowed for a great deal of time and energy to be devoted to the meditative practice itself. The meditative practice itself works out well. At the same time, I notice experientially with manual work. One meditates to the point of almost non-reality of the physical body, and you forget to eat and all that. And you stay sort of grounded, they call it, by doing physical work. There doesn't seem to be any conflict between physical work and meditation. One can continue right on with physical manual labor and not interrupt the meditation at all. You can go right on digging a ditch and it doesn't seem to interfere with anything. So the tradition of the monastic life of prayer and meditation and simple manual labor, which is traditional, seems to work out quite well. Traditional, let's say, meditative practice and intellectualism, dealing in the world of form and commerce, is much more difficult to do. It's not that it's impossible, but it's difficult to look over a corporation's corporate accounts and at the same time being in a really cool state. All right, so there is gross renunciation as a lifestyle, as a major commitment. And many people here have done it in previous lifetimes, and some will probably do it in future lifetimes. And in many people, it is a part-time thing. For many people in the room here who have semi-normal lives, there's periods where you go on retreat. And there are many hours during the week that you spend on meditation, so you try to do a balance between handling the world and at the same time progressing spiritually. The progression spiritually through meditation has classically been likened to renunciation. In this case, the renunciation is mental rather than a social lifestyle. So that all spiritual work, in a way, is a renunciation. First of all, we've talked in previous talks about transcending the opposites. The polarity of the opposites is an illusion. And one doesn't have to choose between opposites. One merely sees the opposite, what seems like in the opposite direction, as an alternate. One then refuses the alternate and merely chooses the positive. So you don't have to be against what is seen to be the negative. You don't have to hate sin and get out there and fight sin. You just choose virtue, right? So you choose the positive rather than attacking the negative so as to avoid getting polarized between the good and bad, good and evil, up and down, and all those illusions. In a way, so renunciation in its essence then, not as a lifestyle, but as an essence, is the essence of all spiritual work, because you're at all times renouncing it as an attachment, renouncing it as a value, renouncing it as a way that you choose to go. So by choosing the positive, in a way, you're always renouncing the negative, To renounce allowing a certain thing to dominate your consciousness. Let us say, somebody says here, how do you handle anger? You see, that will bring up then, what is the anger about? And you'll see, to let it go will require a relinquishment. So the relinquishment could be semantically referred to as a renunciation. The anger then is about a positionality, the willingness to let the positionality go is a renunciation. It's a renunciation of the payoff of the emotionality that goes with it, for one thing. Those that have done the Course in Miracles remember, that anger would come from perception. Perception comes from illusion. And by the willingness to surrender it to the Holy Spirit, you're asking God to recontextualize how you're seeing it, to replace perception with spiritual vision. And what does that mean? It means to see it minus dualistic illusion. The pathway to God we sort of represent in all the lectures, is really the pathway of it. Well, we'll get to devotion. Devotion is underneath it, but it seems to be the pathway through mind. It's really actually the pathway through no mind. When we talked about the unmanifest as the ultimate, we're talking about no mind, right? Because once you start talking about mind, you're talking about form. So all forms of meditation and spiritual work are in essence a renunciation. It's a rejection of what seems to be a this direction for this direction. It's choosing the positive rather than anything else. And that always means letting go of the attachment. And the attachment then means the imaginary value. So anger would be then hanging on to the imaginary value of a certain positionality. Renunciation would be the willingness to let go of that seeming benefit. Then what happens is the field of consciousness itself recontextualizes and you see it differently. And now because you see it differently, there's nothing to be angry about. Does that answer the anger problem? Yeah? Anybody have any questions on anger? Because that was one that has come up several times. But it represents how, in meditation, one dissects and disassembles the construction that leads to the anger. So meditation, in a way, is a constant deepening. It's a deconstruction of the formulation of what appeared to be a problem, and as you take it apart, it disappears as an illusion, and there's nothing to handle because it has no reality. We answered these questions, and I want to answer the last question. Yes. What is the free will in a divinely unfolding universe? Yes, right. The question of free will is a whole other question. We said that everything is happening of its own, including the appearance of the human ego. As we saw, the ego arises out of the evolution of consciousness, beginning in the animal world and evolving up to humanness, in which conflict doesn't even begin to arise in any kind of a serious manner until the physical consciousness, the consciousness of physicality, begins to meet spiritual reality. That's where Homo spiritus gets born. The animal doesn't have any conflict, does it? It doesn't have like a spiritual nature it has to balance against its animal nature. In fact, up to level 200, somebody was asking me about that, up to level 200. It's not a real problem. No, it's not a real problem. Below that, you just hate people and you enjoy hating them and you don't have any problem about that. The Americans say you kill them. What's the problem? Let's ask about that. Where were we going to ask about it? Somebody asked me, oh yes, during the break. It's sort of, how come people who calibrate below 200 are not able to do kinesiology? And I've never asked the question. We have the permission to ask the question, resist. Let's see. Below 200 is below integrity, resist. Below 200 is below integrity, resist. That which is non-integrous is denied the power of truth, resist. Oh, I see. So you see, as you go up the levels of consciousness, power increases. So you don't give gunpowder to children, right? Understand? It's only as you become purified now that you're given a new tool that's enormously powerful. You realize the capacity to be able to tell the truth from falsehood about anything, anywhere in time or the universe has never existed in human history. Just got born. Just got born. Oh, that's Homo spiritus getting born, isn't it? Well, that's part of Homo spiritus getting born. Resist. Wow. Homo spiritus really began about late 1980s, resist. Wow. See, we find out things all the time. They come to your mind, you say, I just got to know that. If you want to know how kinesiology works, that's how it works, you see. And if you've got time, the two of us can get into it, and you start researching a thing, and that brings up the next question, that brings up the next question. Oh yeah, so Homo spiritus is newly born, marked by what I call the antecedent of the second coming of Christ. Okay, Christ said that, let's see, the second coming of Christ would really be preceded by, resist, yeah. That began in the late 1980s, resist. That meant 207. That's the second coming of Christ, see? Like the dawn arising, you just don't go from black to suddenly Jesus Christ is standing there blasting everybody away and they're all going, wow. It's like the energy begins to arise so that he would make sense to you. It would make sense to you. Does Jesus Christ make sense to the Monkey Island at the zoo? No, he could stand there and preach all day, wouldn't mean anything, right? Consciousness has to, so it's like a preparatory advancing of consciousness that's able to handle the truth. First of all, we said this morning the human nervous system has to evolve to handle it. Human nervous system has to evolve to be able to handle it. So the evolution of consciousness then means that the stage is being set. The progression of consciousness is evolving. It evolves. And as it evolves, now it's crossed over to a different paradigm of reality. It was interesting. I was calibrating Walmart. Walmart recently, a couple weeks ago or a month ago, has become the largest corporation in the world. Largest corporation in the world. Back in 94 or so, when I did research on Walmart, I corresponded with Sam Walton, and I admired his integrity, and he was a man who was putting integrity into the business place. I mean, that was revolutionary. And what would come of that? Well, in those days, Walmart calibrated in the high 300s. It still does. So that which is integrous then, which is integrous, tends to, it's now the biggest corporation in the world. So integrity resulted in the biggest, in it's becoming the greatest corporation in the world. I think that's just an interesting phenomenon, because here we are in an era where consciousness is, for the first time in human history, jumping from non-integrity to integrity, and then we have a demonstration of it in the marketplace. Well, in spiritual terminology, is not meaningful to large numbers of the population. Certainly the bottom line of the biggest corporation in the world is very meaningful to a lot of people. And the Wall Street Journal called me up a couple months ago and wanted to know how real is that? How real is it that if you put spiritual reality into the business world, that it literally shows up in the bottom line? Well, I think Walmart answered that question, didn't it? Just like Enron or WorldCom answered it in the other direction. That for things to survive now, it seems to me, they will have to become integrous. In a non-integrous world, integrity is not required to survive. at all. You can succeed in a non-integrative world by stealing everybody else blind and threatening them with guns and invasion. In a more integrative world, this doesn't work anymore. In a more integrative world, bombing the World Trade Center doesn't win you a lot of Islamic converts. That might have worked. I think they're a couple hundred years out of date with that move. That might have thrust people back in the 1500s, you know. In today's world, they look sort of idiotic, you know what I mean? You killed off 3,000 Americans. You've only got 300 million to go, so you better get busy if you want to kill off Americans. You got 300 million to go. So what we're seeing, I think, is a new dimension of the prevalence of human consciousness. Its energy level rises, and with it, it lifts all of mankind. And what was okay before is now what was okay before, because it was above the line, is now below the line. So as the water rose, that which was above the water is now below the water. And I think what will be acceptable and what will prevail in mankind is going to shift as a result of the consequence of the energy field itself. So we saw this morning how the energy field itself lives and sustains in an impersonal, nonlinear way, just by the nature of its gravity. So the human then is like a quark in the field of consciousness. And what accounts for the evolution of one's individual consciousness is letting go of ballast. As you let go of ballast, your quark automatically rises. The field doesn't run, the field doesn't move. Although we said the prevailing field on the planet now at 207 is quite a bit different than 190. They are two different dimensions of existence altogether. All right, I think we've answered those questions. We see that renunciation then is a lifestyle. Renunciation, it can be best expressed as its corollary, not its opposite, but its corollary, which is the choosing of the positive. It's not necessary to renounce the negative, but only to choose the positive and bypass the polarization, bypass getting stuck in a positionality. All right, now we wanted to spend time this afternoon answering questions. We said we wouldn't lecture the whole day. We did it all morning, and we've done it somewhat this afternoon. And now we'd like to discuss anything you would like to discuss. And people asked if we could do the Om again. Yes?
So where does emotion fit in spiritual growth or living out your spiritual values? It seems to have...
You'll have to come over.
Yeah.
You'll have to come over, so I don't understand the question. I'll repeat it, though, for the mic. Yeah.
Go ahead.
What was the question,
Where
Betty?
does emotions fit in spiritual growth or spiritual values? I mean, it seems every time they're spoken of, they're not serving the spiritual life well.
Well, the emotions you see, she's asking what is the value of emotion in spiritual work. We see on the scale of consciousness, maybe we should put that scale back up, that the emotion depends on the level of integrity, and that emotion itself is not necessarily a detrimental. We were talking about negative emotions, which calibrate below 200, hatred, anger, self-pity, guilt, remorse. But as you get over 200, now emotion becomes a positive asset. Integrity, the commitment to integrity is a certain emotionality. It's not emotionality the way most people think of it, but it's a certain space of commitment. You can do it when you clean up the kitchen in the morning. You can commit to getting this place absolutely clean the way I want it. Eventually, you see, as the emotion goes up, it calibrates higher and higher. Probably the most important emotion, and we will get to that in a later lecture, in spiritual work is that of love, but beyond that, devotion. Devotion. What makes any spiritual understanding comprehensible and work is that one's devotion to the truth. So the pathway of heart and the pathway of mind are one and the same. They end up one and the same. Because the pathway of Advaita, let's say the Advaita, pathway of no mind, the pathway of Zen, is really based on a profound and intense dedication. One-pointedness of mind is the expression of an intense dedication, a love that is not in the world of ordinary emotionality. The love, the devotion to achieve one-pointedness of mind is extreme and intense. To leave everything in the world, fixate only on that which is straight ahead of you, with no deviance, takes an intense dedication, and that is devotion. There's a very simple way to meditate, and one that I teach people most generally, is to merely sit and close your eyes. If you sit and close your eyes and look straight ahead, if you sit and close your eyes and look straight ahead, you'll see little corpuscles. If we all look ahead, close your eyes, look ahead, you see all little dancing corpuscles, right? Those are the little blood corpuscles going through the capillaries in the retina. And you just look straight ahead. If you look straight ahead, you see there's no real form there. There's all these little dancing little particulates of light. They've got some kind of a name, I've forgotten what the name is. Little illuminations like. If you look straight ahead, then you see this sort of a semi-blank field of little dancing, minuscule, tiny dotlets of light. One can just look at them observationally without comment or anything, and at the same time be aware of one's breathing. Not to alter, just be aware of the breathing. So within oneself, you're watching the breathing and you're looking straight ahead, and you just profoundly relax and let that take you wherever it takes you. As you do, the sense of being me here begins to disappear. The sense of infinite space begins. One gets the feeling that it's almost like space looking at space. Like there's not an individual person looking at the back of the eyelids. It's like it's beginning to, it happens of its own. The breathingness also, one becomes aware is happening of its own. There is no breather doing the breathing. There is no thinker doing the thinking. There is no seer doing the seeing. No thinker behind the thoughts. No doer behind the actions. No looker even. All this is just happening of its own, spontaneously. Where does free will come in? Free will comes in then in choosing to go in the direction of God. Choosing to go in the direction of spiritual truth as one understands it at this point of the evolution of one's own consciousness. Free will then is the innate capacity for choice, but that choice is limited. It's karmically determined. The choices of the past have already determined the possible choices of the present. A zebra cannot choose to be a kangaroo. So the karmic evolution of consciousness throughout all of the evolution of human consciousness and its expression in one's own particular karmic development then results in a certain range of karmic possibilities. Within that range, free will operates to the degree that one energizes it, chooses it, wishes it. Free will doesn't mean that a camel can decide to be a kangaroo. No. Free will means that within the range of what is possible due to my own karmic inheritance, what is within the range of possibility, one can make the choice. However, the minute that choice is made, it already shifts the future choices. So free will then makes a choice from moment to moment. Each choice then instantly changes the potentiality. It either enlarges the choice or decreases the choice. We saw that on our chart of quantum mechanics. Every choice then becomes, you might say, in chaos theory, a bifurcation. So free will is like an endless series of bifurcations. Because I choose this, now these possibilities open up. And again, if I choose this, thereby this whole basket of opportunities open up. Now, if I choose to be part of the field rather than the particular, I've immensely opened my potentialities. When you choose the field rather than the content of the field, now you're choosing an infinite potentiality. So a group like us here today, by commitment, have chosen to realize the truth of one's reality as context. So habitually, the members of the group here, in their own spiritual practice, are constantly bypassing content and constantly opening the avenue for the conscious awareness of context as their ultimate reality. By saying, I am not this, I am not that, the past way of negation, or by saying, I am this and I am that, one is already changing one's karmic potentiality. To go out of this body and come back in another then, one starts with the basket of infinite potentialities that you left off with the last time because you frankly wore out the last body. Why can't you keep one body for 100,000 years? Well, until you're done with evolution. It's because it doesn't work out that way. And I can't know what it is to be black if I got a white body. I don't know what it's like to be a woman if I've got a male body. I mean, I'm stuck with the limitation, you understand? So you may choose to come back as everybody, sort of the everythingness of potentiality. The only way you can know a thing is to be it. That's why. You can't know it by reading about it. I don't know what it is to be a woman, unless I am one. I can read about it, it's interesting, it's intriguing, and I can become very, very erudite about it, but I don't know what it is to be it unless I am it. So one thing that karmic evolution, one of its great values, is you get to understand and know things by virtue of being them. Wow. That's a fact, eh? That's a fact, is it? Wow. Well, so those 2 lifetimes I realized why I did them. You know, you have to actually be that to get it, to know what that is. Wow. There's some rough lifetimes, but that's the only way you got to know it, you know? Ooh, so, what it is to feel like, I mean, you got to get chopped up by somebody to find out what it's like to feel like to get chopped up. And then in this lifetime, you're merciful and you don't chop up people. Wow, I see what it is like, you know. First your arm goes and this leg goes, and you watch your head go flying off, and you walk through the world and fly upside down before the blood leaves your brain, and you think, God, that's what I did to people. Now you got it. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like it takes so much to get a thing, right? We'd all have one lifetime otherwise. You know, we'd read a good book, read about God and Jesus, and there you are in heaven. Done. I don't know. The universe seems to be that you've practically got to live through all of it to transcend it. Wonder if that's so. All these things come up. I don't know where they come from. That's so, resist. Whoa, So karma isn't a bad thing. Karma is not a bad thing. Let's get that across. Karma is not a bad thing. Karma is an exciting and wonderful thing. Resist. Let's not put down karma, folks. I mean, you don't get to go to the circus unless you go to the circus, you know? I don't really want to know what it's like to go through childbirth, to tell you the truth. But my heart is certainly with the experience. Do I know what it's like to go through childbirth? I know what it's like to go through childbirth through the previous lifetimes, resist. Oh, I do, huh? I guess I blotted it out, folks. Now, as those lifetimes come back to you, they're multitudinous. They're a lot, you know. I think the Buddha said there were thousands, and anyway, we get to understand it by being it. See, the mind cannot know anything. It can only know about something. That's a very important, it sounds like a fine distinction, but it's crucial. The mind can only know about a thing. The only way to know a thing is to be it. Be it. To be the context out of which all seeming reality arises is the way you realize, that's what's called self-realization. Oh, right. To realize it by being it, huh? Then, so realization is just that recognition that you are it, is it? So, yeah, I thought it was simple, right? The realization that one does realize, the realization of what is real, is realization. That's a good example, you see what I'm saying? The only way to realize what it is to be a human being is to be one, and then you get what it is. It's very difficult, it's very complex, it's very challenging. I think anybody who has lived a human life deserves to go to heaven. If I was St. Peter, I'd say, you lived a human life? Pass. Because its challenge is exquisite. It's, you know, the complexity of the human mind itself, its enormous identifications as consciousness evolved throughout time, its enormous capacity for identification and then losing the reality of who it is in that identification. You know? It loses the touch with that which it really is. It loses the fact that it's context, and it begins to believe that it's content. That's all that's happening. That's all that's happening. Is that it loses, you know, like, who was the God that could imagine what it's like to be a cow? And, Krishna. And one that was like a cow, and he became one, and then he forgot that he'd willed it, and some other God had to come and rescue him to remind him that he'd forgotten that he willed himself to be a cow to see what it's like to be a cow. And of course, as a cow, he couldn't remember that he had willed it because now he was a cow. Indra came and helped rescue him and said, helped rescue him, that he'd wished himself to see what it's like to be a cow. So we've done that as humans, haven't we? We've all been curious what it's like to be a human and what it is to be here, and we found out. All right, so renunciation then is to renounce the false for the true, to see that truth has no opposite. There is no opposite to truth, just as there is no opposite to God. Only the true is true, and only that which exists has reality. Only the allness of God has any reality. That takes care of existence versus non-existence, allness versus nothingness. How those karmic things persist in lifetime. One time somebody went to a lecture that I gave back in Sedona Villa. That was, I don't know, back in the 80s, late 70s, somewhere. Anyway, somebody heard a lecture on consciousness. I was talking about the calibrated levels of consciousness in those days and the part it plays in sobriety. In the middle of it, this guy just went into a really great state. And after years of succumbing to alcohol, he was beyond it. And in fact, I calibrated him one time. He went up 150 points. So he came out of the pits and went into a state of like unconditional love and joy. So anyway, a couple months later, I hear a knock at the door, and here he is. This guy's a workman, and he's a very good carpenter, excellent carpenter. Cabinet maker, actually. And he backed up with a trailer, and here was this incredible table made from a slab of wood this thick from the top of Mingus Mountain that had been hit by lightning in 1956, and he'd saved this incredible slab of wood. And he'd made this incredible, he thought it was a bench, but I use it as a table. It weighs a couple hundred pounds. Anyway, he made this thing. He spent 6 weeks making it out of appreciation for his recovery. And he backed up with this thing, and somehow we got it into the house. And there engraved on the top in Sanskrit is nothingness versus allness. He'd never heard me, I never said anything about it. There at age 3, nothingness versus allness. And there it was inscribed and beautiful carved. Allness versus nothingness. So you can see how karmically a thing like that prevails in the field of consciousness. He emerges then as getting reborn in another lifetime to transcend that illusion. Somebody picks it up, in Sedona we call it on the inner. Somebody picks up on the inner that's prevailing in your consciousness. And at the time he brought that, it was as yet unresolved. It was allness versus nothingness was as yet not evolved in this consciousness. It was sometime after that. So how did his psyche pick that up as the central theme of this lifetime? Because I didn't give lectures like I am now. I never mentioned anything about personal experience. I just talked about the calibrated levels of consciousness and all. So somehow his psyche had picked up the central focus of that. So that's our karmic, you might say, our karmic unfoldment from lifetime to lifetime. And the choices we make then are the exercise of free will. For some reason, the kinesiology as a tool is not suitable for somebody who calibrates below 200. In the beginning, when I discovered the capacity of kinesiology to tell truth from falsehood, I didn't know what to do with it for years, and I didn't know whether to write about it, because at that time I thought it could be used for, extremely nefarious ends. Sort of like discovering gunpowder, dynamite. Should you share that with the world or not? Discovering nuclear power, any of those things, it's sort of a moral dilemma. So I really puzzled over it for years. Should this be shared with the world or not shared with the world? You know what I'm saying? At that time, I didn't realize that to make it work, you yourself have to be integrous. So it couldn't be used for non-integrity. But for years, I did not publish it or write about it because I thought at the time it was a two-edged sword, and that it could be used to destroy mankind. And so I didn't want to share it. And it was only later that I got that it was shareable, and that it was safe, and that if your intention is less than 200 or the people are less than 200, in other words, it'd be like non-integrous people can't make dynamite go off. So I was delighted to find that. I only found that out after I wrote Power versus Force, and then I had to revise the new edition because originally I thought anybody could use kinesiology and get the truth about anything. And then later on I saw, I know what resolved it. I saw that the only way you could get ahead would be by becoming more integrous. In other words, the only way you can, let's say, compete on the world of integrity is by becoming more integrous. The only way you can become more powerful is to become more loving. And therefore, it couldn't be used in a destructive way. And that understanding allowed me to publish Power versus Force. But it was only after the first edition that I saw, we only lately discovered that unless you're over 200, and we didn't discover it until we started getting letters from people who said it didn't work. Well, I'd used it for years in all kinds of groups, and kinesiologists and holistic health practitioners. It always worked. It always worked. We never saw that it didn't work. So I thought, where is this coming from? I mean, we tried it and it doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? And then we discovered that it had these limitations: integrity of motive, integrity of intention, integrity of the two people. So there was a built-in safeguard, because certainly to have the capacity to discern the truth or falsehood of anything gives you, in a way, an incredible degree of power, more power than any human being. Actually, the average person today, certainly anybody who attends these conferences, has more power than anybody ever existed, really, in a way. Caesar didn't have the way to tell truth from falsehood, or, you know what I'm saying? Is that's true? I mean, the average spiritually educated person now has more power than all the potentates who ever lived. Resist. Yeah, you got more power than Caesar ever had. Caesar couldn't tell the difference between truth or falsehood. You know, he could only go out there, and if you won, you were right, and if you lost, you lost. And so it's a gift that mankind has now. It's a gift, like a gift. It came out of that advancement of consciousness. So we were like given a gift to be able, the gift of discernment. It was, throughout time, discernment was when the third eye opened up in the Buddhic body, and it didn't happen until you're quite evolved spiritually. To be able to look at a thing and see whether it's integrous or non-integrous, the true from the false, is a very advanced level of spiritual maturity, one which many people don't make. Otherwise, all the false gurus and a lot of the New Age nonsense and circus acts would have no attraction. When a person is very spiritually evolved, they see the essence of what a thing is just by glancing or just hearing about it. You know, I can pick up a letter and I can tell you just by the feel of the letter what it's all about or what its energy is. And but that only comes at a certain point. Up to that time, you're easily bamboozled by all kinds of smoke and incense and sandals and long hair and oohs and ahs and mantras and chants and music and bongs and bells and crap, you know. That's the astral circus in a way, you know, and card readings and psychics and readings and master this, that, and the other on the other side who tells you to sell your Chevy and buy a Ford, okay? He says to sell your Chevy and buy a Ford, okay? All right. So the way to spiritual advancement is difficult. You have to evolve through the whole difficulty of being a human being, which in itself is quite a trip, is it not? Just to be a human being and survive is already an enormous confrontation. And it means always, in a certain way, a constant renunciation, because the child, its first thing is to learn how to renounce this for that. We call it good and bad. So the way the normal child works is its egocentricity is surrendered because in return it gets approval and love from the mother. If you let go of this impulsivity and this greediness and this desirability, you get rewarded by approval from the mother. So the evolution of a healthy human consciousness then really depends on adequate parenting. If there's nobody there to reward you for letting go of your selfishness, then you end up a psychopath. You end up a sociopath. You just do what you want to do. If you want it, you steal it. If you take it, you feel like punching somebody, you punch them. So the chronicity, the recidivism of criminality is because at that critical level of human consciousness, there wasn't the letting go of the narcissistic core of the ego, which persists in the psychopath. There's really no point to incarceration, you know, as punishment is sort of idiotic. The reason it doesn't work is it has no reality to it at all. You know, because if this defect is a chronic illness, and which it is, it shows up by age 1 or 2 or 3, the inability to delay gratification. And then it shows itself as a pattern of behaviors which always ignore the rights or the feelings of others. It's just total egocentricity from the word go. This becomes a lifestyle. So putting somebody in prison for 18 years, it's not surprising that within 24 hours of letting them out, they do exactly the same thing to put them in prison the first time. It's because it's like an illness due to a defect, whether the defect is genetic or experiential because of the lack of adequate mothering and parenting in childhood. But in dealing with myself professionally, it seems to be an illness. Criminalism is an illness. Criminalism is an illness. And there's no treatment for it except to protect society from it. You know, when you want to protect, if it's a ravenous predator and you're not going to change its ways, there's no point of punishing the wolf for being a wolf. The wolf is a wolf. It's a predator. So you can isolate yourself from the predator to protect society. So you can put them in compounds where, you know, there's a fence down the middle and predators on this side and non-predators on this side. That's what we do. You know? We put the sheep on this side and we put a fence between the wolf and the sheep. Yeah? You don't punish the wolf for being a wolf. Say, bad wolf, you ate sheep, boom, boom, boom. We'll give you 18 years. At the end of 18 years, what is the wolf going to do? It's going to eat sheep the first day out. After 18 years of not eating sheep, man, you are really hungry for sheep. You know? The most horrendous case of rape I've ever heard of. I don't want to even mention the details because it's so awful. But this guy did something that was so butcherous and so horrible as to be unbelievable. And after 26 years in prison for doing this horrendous thing, do you know within 24 hours he did the same thing all over again to another woman? You know, chopped her arms off. So when you see that one of these recidivists are about to be released, you know that the next crime is going to happen in the next 24 hours. And what are you going to do, George, after 26 years in prison? I'm going to rape the first woman I see. That's what I'm doing. That's the truth of it. So we see that criminalism then is a failure of this maturation process, where you surrender the selfish egocentricity of the ego in return for love. That devotion that is developed later as the spiritually committed person has that to a high degree. That the sense of the absolute sovereignty of love as a central focus of one's life is what brings people to spirituality. Intuitive awareness that which is infinitely loving is just beyond one's conscious grasp, and at the same time is innate within one's presence as the reality of your own existence. Traditionally, of course, religion is divided God into immanent and transcendent, and the mystic is the one in whom spiritual reality comes from within. To be faced with existence versus non-existence does not come from without. It stems from the presence of God within you, almost demanding recognition about its truth and its reality. The mystic then is, it's the one who knows God as immanent, as the self. God immanent as the self. In some religions, this is considered heresy, you understand. At one time, I would have been burned at the stake. Was I ever burned at the stake? Probably. Anyway, I don't remember being burned at the stake. I think I do, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, anyway, being a mystic was not a good thing centuries ago in Europe. It would get you burned at the stake. That which was said. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I know. Anyway, the mystic did not fare too well in many civilizations, and it is today considered a heresy in many contexts. In Islam, for instance, the mystic is considered a heretic. See, Islam talks about yoga, a union with God. It's like there's a me, and then there's a God, see? And then the two become like a unity. Well, inasmuch as there is only the sun shining, removing the clouds doesn't join the sun, you see what I'm saying? That which is not real evaporates, leaving only that which is real. So there is no union of the unreal with the real. The ego doesn't join and be in a yoga and a union with God, right? So the mystic is a heretic in the views of Islam, and in certain traditional branches of Christianity is not considered heretical in the Hindu or the Buddhist, but they're more sophisticated. So God is transcendent then means God as otherness. You get that the person looking for transcendent God through religion is looking for an otherness called God. It's an other. That's why the Buddha didn't talk about God, because the minute you talk about God, you're looking for something other than what you are. There is me, wicked worm here, worthless worm, and then there's God. You see how separated that is? So the more you insist on the reality of a transcendent God, the more you deny your own spiritual reality. Huh? If the only God that is a real God is transcendent, then your chances are nil, folks, because his quality is different than yours. The difficulties with the intellectual approaches to God is that, let's take the arguments of Thomas Aquinas. When you go back through an endless series of causes to the prime cause, the epistemologic error there is the failure to realize that the initial cause is a different quality than the rest of the billiard balls. And an endless series of billiard balls does not start with one super billiard ball. It starts with one non-billiard ball, a hole. It changes its quality. As you go back to source, then you find a different quality than what you're looking for. You have to have something of a greater dimension. It's now in a different category of logic. You don't find the source of an endless series of billiard balls in one billiard ball. You find it in a non-billiard ball. Huh? So most spiritual groups are made up of people who have gone a certain direction in religion. I've loved religion, and I, to this day, adore it. I adore going to church. I adore the music. I adore the preaching. I love ministers and all that goes with the church. You know, I love it. Except that's one direction to go, and enlightenment is another. Understand? Salvation is one thing, enlightenment is another. Christ came for purposes of salvation. The Buddha came to teach enlightenment. Two different things.
Salvation from what?
Salvation from the illusion of your own reality. You know, karmically we said that the universe is one karmic reality. The total universe is one karmic unity. In that karmic unity, there are the various levels and dimensions. And Christ said, if you do things that are calibrate below 200, you will end up the next lifetime in very miserable places. So did the Buddha say that, so did Krishna say that. Every enlightened being that's ever existed says there's a multi-strata within the realm of consciousness, going from the lowest hells to the higher hells, to the purgatories, the lower heavens to the higher heavens, to enlightenment itself, to go beyond all positionalities. They said, don't go there. Woe to those who abuse the innocence of the child, because where they are going when they leave the body is not a pleasant place to go. So Christ wasn't threatening you with hell, but he was telling you it's a fact that the karmic weight, the karmic calibration of one's karmic body, let's say, like a cork in the water, will rise or sink to various levels. And all it's saying is that the lower levels are incredibly awful. Having been there, I will guarantee you, I will tell you, that hell is far worse than you can imagine. You can imagine the worst incredible hell that your imagination, and you're not even scratching it. It goes far beyond that. It goes beyond the dreadful, beyond the terrible, beyond the indescribable, to realms of non-form. In the realms of non-form, hell takes on dimensions that you can't even imagine. And so Jesus Christ, out of his love for mankind, he came down from heaven. He never had any previous lifetimes. He came down from heaven to tell you that that is the case, that if you choose below 200. So all Jesus said was, don't choose that which is below 200. That's all he said. If it makes you weak with kinesiology, bypass it. That's all Jesus said. Renounce that which is below 200. And that's all the Buddha said. That's all anybody's ever said. We all know that the horrific leads us to intense inner psychic suffering. You don't have to be dead to discover hell. We've all done things that we've lain awake squirming with inner pain about, sometimes for months or years even. So you don't have to be dead to experience the consequence. So everything has its own karmic corollary, not necessarily a consequence as though it's a punishment or something. But if you choose to walk within certain dimensions, you're going to be exposed to certain temperatures, barometric pressures, light radiations. The hells are very bad places to go. That's all Jesus says. Woe to those who do this, that, or the other, because you're going to experience hellish places. Well, most people, because they identify with the body, don't remember the hells they're in. An enlightened person remembers it all. He'll tell you. Not because he read it in a book, because it's a recent experience. It's a recent experience. In this lifetime, it's a very recent experience. I will tell you that hell is one hell of valid place. It's possible to exist in a place of such spiritual pain and agony. One wishes that one had never come into existence at all. And so Jesus Christ told the truth. That was his purpose. The Buddha, when we ask about the Buddha, he had many, many lifetimes, and many, many lifetimes. And he said that the way out of it altogether is to transcend all identification with temporality and form. And then you will not be subject to reincarnated lifetimes, which may or may not be agonizing. All right, does that take care of heaven and hell? I thought we threw in heaven and hell by 3:15. Any questions? And then we'll take a break, and then after that, anybody wants to talk to me personally, I'll be up here, and I'll just meet with people and say hi to them and speak whatever I can say. Yes, sir.
Will you talk about prayer?
What about
Prayer.
And how it can help understand?
Yes, we said that prayer, when we were talking about quantum mechanics, we were trying to give the science of prayer, that prayer then opens a potentiality in the infinite reality, and is effective. Again, its effectiveness has to do with the calibrated level of the prayer itself, the calibrated level of the person praying, that person's karma, and the karmic conditions of the world. You can pray for all Arabs to drop dead tomorrow, but they're not going to, see? So how integrous is the prayer? Most prayers are like children's prayer. I can remember running for my violin lesson, praying up a storm. My mother said, I left this little country school, I got to go 1 mile down Dean Road, and catch the bus. The buses were like every 2 hours, you know, I mean, not a bus every 10 minutes. You know. So it was the bus that would get you to your violin lesson. And I'm carrying this violin case and I'm tearing down here the 1 mile, going like hell and praying up a storm the whole mile that God would hold up the bus till I got there, because I left 5 minutes late. Bus took off. No wonder I became an atheist for years, right? So that's self-interest. So it's what is your expectation of prayer? That if you are presenting it as a gift to the universe in that quantum potentiality, then you're influencing the likelihood. We said that quantum mechanics has to do with likelihoods and potentialities. You know, whatchamacallit, we were looking on television last night. Anyway, the likelihood of your finding a thing where you saw it last time is already changed. The Heisenberg principle, I'm sorry. The Heisenberg principle is that having looked at a thing, the likelihood is not going to be there the second time because you looked at it the first time. You've already changed the potential reality. So prayer changes the, I think, potentiality. I think 1,000 people praying for a certain thing increases the likelihood of that. It doesn't cause it, though, because reality is beyond cause. But it does increase likelihood. What I think it does is change the buoyancy of the cork, so the cork is more likely to rise up within the karmic reality of the sea. That's what I think prayer does, you know, increases likelihood. It also creates form. Certainly, how did that carpenter know allness versus nothingness and do it in Sanskrit? I mean, how did he know that? He picked it up somewhere in form, you know? Any other question? And then we'll take a break and then we'll just spend the rest of the day chatting. Yes?
Related to the prayer question, I know there are a lot of new spiritual masters that are, when you ask them about praying, they say that reinforces your delusion that you are separate from God. Can you talk about that and intention and how that relates?
Well, there's various different levels at which the question can be understood and answered. On a certain level, no prayer is necessary, nor is it answerable, nor does it have any reality. But that's one level. That isn't the level that's meant by people. When people say, you know, how good is prayer? I think prayer is effective as when it's karmically limited to at the time, within a universe being what it is at the time. It certainly is a declaration of intention. Certainly is a statement of intention. To say that prayer is saying that you're separate from God, you know, what is it that's praying? Your ego is what's praying. Your spirit doesn't need to pray. The ultimate reality of that which you already is already there. You have no need to pray. So it's the ego that's praying in the first place. Your ego is not one and the same as God, or you wouldn't be a spiritual seeker. You would be a guru, you know? You'd be enlightened, you'd be a Christ. So those are ways of constructing things. Any question can be addressed from different levels. So one of the values of the scale of consciousness is to calibrate. You can tell at what level do you want an answer at what, because anything you can say about anything is only an appearance. It's only a style, a nominalization. It's everything is depending on from what position you're viewing it. Everything is a product of point of view. And the answer you can get is only an artificial construction coming out of a point of view. That's the whole basis of quantum mechanics. You find what you look for. If you're looking for dots and zeros, you'll find lots of dots and zeros. If you're looking for triangles and whistles, you'll find lots of triangles and whistles. The consciousness is of such a nature that it has an illusion. It thinks there's a this finding of that. Actually, by asking this, it's already defined the thatness. The question itself has already defined the answer. Therefore, there isn't a this finding of that. There's only consciousness coming to the obvious conclusion that whatever you ask about is what you're going to find. And certainly quantum mechanics is a beautiful scientific way of stating that. The Heisenberg principle is that you will discover what you're looking for. So the advancing edge of physics is up against the fact that until it knows more about consciousness, it can't really make any further advance. Is it a thisness finding an objective out thatness, or is it only discovering how the human mind works, projected out into an apparent universe, which in illusory thinks is a that being looked at by a this? No, it's all of this being looked at by a this. That's what we know from here. There's only a this finding a this. And what it finds is, so if you're looking for little blue pebbles, then you'll find the little blue pebbles. If you're looking for little green ones, you'll find the little green ones, because that's what you're looking for. So you can only discover that which you're seeking.
We were talking about the consciousness level of the people in the room rising as a result of being here. I'm wondering, does that persist when we leave this day? Does that?
Oh, does it hang with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it goes with you. It goes with the ticket. You get to take it. You get to take it home. Anything left on the plate, you get to take the sandwiches, cookies home with you.
That sort of brings up the question that if you come to all the lectures, then how far do you get to go?
You want to ask?
But they own. What you own, yeah. It only goes up because you've owned it, because you've said yes to it, because you've incorporated it and made it part of yours. Otherwise, the calibrated level doesn't go up. I give the same lecture to another audience. They start at 182, and at the end of the lecture, it's 182. In other words, nobody got anything or took it into themselves. Nothing got absorbed or moved as a result. But, a group like this is very easy to talk to because they're like a sponge, they just pick up anything and go with it. Okay, so we'll take a break again.